Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. We're back. We're so sorry about earlier. There were some weird technical difficulties, but we're here, and today's guest is going to be Rudy.
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
So tell us about yourself.
What do you want to know? So I've worked at the library for going on 5 years now, reference assistant. Um, and yeah, I like to read. I like to play video games. I like sports.
Mm-hmm.
My first encounter with anything that's like unsolved or disappearances of something.
Do you have any favorite unsolved mystery case that you think about?
Favorite unsolved mystery? The one about the girl who was in the hotel and then she wound up in the water tank.
So you might be excited then to learn about this. Our next episode, I'm going to be covering Elisa Lam.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll be covering her with Heather Bobrowicz, a librarian here at the McAllen Public Library. It's going to be happening June 23rd.
Nice. I'll be sure to tune into that.
Yeah. All right. Hello, everybody. And before we get started, I do want to share that everyone is welcome to share comments, whether it's questions, your opinions on certain things. Feel free to share. This is a judgment-free zone, and we love hearing everybody's thoughts. So moving on from that, I explained earlier that this is a PG-13 warning. So what do we say to all the kids that are under the age of 13? Get out.
Get out or shield your eyes or just leave the room.
Yes. So we're going to get started with this case. This is the case of the disappearance of Joan Risch. You ready to share the slide? Here you go. All right.
Yep, I got it right there.
Perfect. So I think the first thing we're going to do is, who was Joan Risch? We can get started with, so she was born around May 12. She was then known as Joan Carolyn Bard. She was born in Brooklyn to Harold and Josephine Bard. Now, moving on from that, she had a relatively normal childhood. When she was like around 8 or 9 years old, her family did go from Brooklyn to New Jersey. And yeah, Jersey.
That's already that by itself is already such a bad. You're up for failure. You're going to New Jersey.
I mean, what can you do? And so, unfortunately, this is kind of where things changed quite a bit for Joan. So we're going to start with our the fire. Unfortunately, around late February, Joan became an orphan. She lost her parents to a fire. And Joan survived because she wasn't at home at the time. She was actually visiting a grandmother. And here we actually
I know that some people find this part of the story kind of suspicious, right?
Yeah, it's a little... Yeah. I try to find sources too, like exactly why did they say this is suspicious? But I really could not find much evidence. I try to keep this research based as possible, but we did find an article that talked about the fire. It was an obituary for her parents, and as you can see, that is.
It doesn't say anything about foul play or anything. It's just bad luck.
Yeah, I mean, if someone does find something weird or suspicious about the fire and it's mentioned somewhere in more detail, by all means, share it with us. And thank you, Bobby. Thank you.
What did Bobby say?
That sounds very suspicious.
Well, the suspicious part is that Joan was at the grandmother's house. She just happened to be over there while her parents were suffocating in this fire.
Yeah, it is interesting timing, but I didn't see any. To be fair, I also didn't see any mention of like what caused the accident either. So maybe there is a newspaper out there that gives more detail, but alas, I couldn't find it, and I couldn't figure out where in New Jersey she was in. Although,
I didn't find anything about that either. Well, they had the address. Mountain something.
Actually,
Mountain Lake or something.
Yeah, Mount Lake. Yeah, I tried to check the newspapers there, but unfortunately, I wasn't a patron at the library up there, so I couldn't access it. Which, by the way, guys, if you are interested in our newspaper archives, be sure you're a McAllen Public Library patron.
Definitely.
But moving on from that, she did end up going with some relatives. She ended up staying with her mom's sister and her husband. So she was around 8 or 9 years old at this time. She was born in 1930. Actually,
1930.
yeah, 1930, right? So
Yeah.
she was around that age. So she was like 8 or 9 when this all happened. So her family took her in, and her name was then known as Joan Carolyn Nattrass.
See, it's finally starting to look up for Joan. Her life is back on track. She has a new family who loves her. She's got a new identity. Maybe she can start anew.
Yeah. Despite all that, she does move forward, and some good things happen to her. Like if we go on next, she ends up finding her passion in. Oh wait, before we get started,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Before we get started, there is something I do want to add too. So, according to some friends and acquaintances by her, she did deal with some sexual abuse as a child. It's unclear if this happened before or after the fire, but apparently it did happen to Joan. We were not given a specific time, who to suspect. I actually found out about this through a reporter, Matt Bai, and I actually emailed him. He's a former reporter at the Boston Globe. He wrote back to me because I was like, hey, where did you hear that source, of that allegation?
You were calling him out on his sources.
But yeah, he did write back, and he was like, I'm glad you're doing it. I have thought about that story over the years. I think everyone who spent any time with it kept thinking about it long afterward. Sorry to say I don't remember my sourcing, so I'd just be guessing. It's been a long time, and I was very young. I know that whatever I wrote was all very solidly sourced and wasn't questioned. I recall that I did speak with one of her closest friends. I think we also need I know it's not great, but things do look better for Joan later on in her period. And I will say that she was a very interesting person. So, especially as she was a woman in the 1950s and 60s. So Joan graduated from Wilson College in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. She got a degree in English literature. She ended up going into publishing. She started out as a secretary, and then she moved up into being an editorial assistant at Harcourt, Brace, and World. She later worked for the Thomas Y. Crowell Company. So
Stuff is finally starting to look up for Joan.
Yeah, and you see some of her passions, like some of her hobbies include prose writing and reading. After that, she got married to Martin Risch, who was an executive at one of the publishing houses. She left work to become a stay-at-home wife and mother. And moving forward, she and Martin had 2 kids. Like, they were pretty good years. So Lillian, her daughter, was born in 1957, and David in 1959. They're actually around my parents' age.
The children?
Yeah, my dad was born. Yeah, my dad was born in 1958. My mom was born in 1957. So, yeah, this is very.
It's weird because like a lot of these people that are in this whole story, a lot of them could still be alive. Like even Joan, she'd be what?
90?
90 something? Yeah, 90.
Yeah, which yeah, I know it's very old, but at the same time, like nowadays, people are living up to 102. So
it's true.
You never know. But like moving forward from that, we're going to talk more into the day of her disappearance. So this is what happened the last day Joan was seen by anyone. So we're going to start with the timeline. Around 8 a.m., her husband Martin had to do jobs out of town. They lived in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and And they were actually they were only in Lincoln, Massachusetts. I'm sorry, I just mispronounced that state. I'm so sorry. I
And for a couple of years, right? Like 3 years or something.
Actually, they were only there for like 6 or 7 months.
Oh wow.
They moved there actually from I forgot where they moved from, but yeah, it's very New England. They were in the New England region. They were in different places from there. So Martin was required to do a business trip in New York City. So he woke up around dawn and he went to catch his flight for New York City. Joan, made breakfast for the kids and herself, and she also asked her neighbor, who comes more into the story, Barbara Barker, if she could watch David for her. She and Lillian needed to do errands that morning. David was like around 2 years old. He was still like very baby.
Right.
They kept his crib up in their bedroom.
So normal enough day. Mm-hmm. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to 11 a.m.
So like after all that was done with, Joan and Lillian went to the dentist. Joan got a cavity filling, and she actually, before she left, she made an appointment for an October 31st appointment, to do more work to be done. Although I'm not sure if I would want to go to the dentist on Halloween. But
that would have been like the next week, right?
Yeah, it would have been next week. So she does a few more errands with Lillian, and she also picks up David from Barbara's house, and they head home. So we go next on that. It's 11:15. A driver for a dry cleaning service, his name was W.F. Colburn. He came by to pick up a few of Martin's suits. According to Colburn, Joan didn't lock her front door regularly. This is the 60s, and I think a lot of people kind of, especially if you lived in suburban area, you kind of you're like, oh, whatever, there's no trouble here. That's how it was.
That's just the way it was back then.
Yeah, and according to some of her friends, she did keep it as a habit to unlock her door, probably for her and her friends to come in and out. So according to Colburn, Joan was acting normal. They had a quick conversation before he left. Eventually Joan, made lunch for the kids. Yeah, we click next on that. Yeah. She made lunch for the kids. She put David upstairs for a nap. And Barbara across the street, she took her son Douglas over to Joan's house so he could play with Lillian. The kids were playing in the driveway. Joan did a little bit of landscaping. She had some shears, just working on some things. And then.
Barbara took her son over to play with Joan's daughter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you see a lot of them going back and forth. So this is where things get a little interesting. Around 1:55 p.m., Joan walked Lillian and Douglas to Barbara Barker's yard. Apparently, she told Lillian that she was going to come back. What's interesting, though, is that Joan never told Barbara that she dropped the kids off there. She just left them out in the yard. Barbara had no idea, so she walked back to her house, and it gets interesting.
So something happened between 1:55 and 11:30. I'm thinking, right?
I mean, I think it was actually more from 1:55 to around 3 or 4 p.m. That's when things got hazy, because people saw Joan around those times. She was just acting normal. Although I will say, though, that her morning looked very busy, very, very busy. I don't think I could ever make it as a 60s housewife. Let me put it that way. So, like I said, it gets weirder. Barbara was in her kitchen, and she looked at through the window, and she saw Joan. Now, according to Barbara, Joan looked like she was running or walking fast, and she had something red in her arms. Barbara thought that she was playing some sort of game with the kids, not knowing that the kids were, at her house.
Yeah, she didn't even know that they were there with her.
Yeah, Barbara described Joan as moving quickly from her parked car to the garage and entering her home through there. This was the last confirmed sighting of Joan.
So this is interesting because something red in her arms. It could be anything, right? It could be something bloody or something just red.
Did she have an injury? Did something happen? This is where your hair stands a little on end. So it was around by 4 p.m. that Barbara realized that Joan had dropped off the kids. She's like, oh, okay. So she took Lillian back to her home because Barbara needed to do some errands with her son. Barbara just left Lillian over at the front of the house. Like, there you go. I'll see you later. Like I said, 1960s. Who cares?
She just left Lillian there and just assumed Joan was inside.
That's an interesting thought, Bobby. I couldn't really find too much about Colburn. I mean,
Colburn did something. He came back, parked down the street.
The thing is, though, it was a car that was sighted, and we'll get into that too.
Yeah, there's a couple cars.
So she left Lillian there and went back home. Around 4:33, Lillian came back after Barbara and Douglas finished their errands, and she told her, quote, "Mommy's gone and the kitchen is covered in red paint." And she was telling her, like, oh yeah, David's crying, he needs his diaper change. So Barbara is like, oh my God, and rushes over. And Joan is gone, and there's red paint, and David's upstairs in a soiled diaper crying for his mom. Barbara called the police, as anyone would in that situation.
Interesting. So by this time, Joan was already gone.
This time, it really hit everyone like, oh my God, she's not here. Something went on in this house. And we do have some photos to show later on about that. And to this day, those photos are debated all the time. So all right. So
there's witness sightings, right?
Yes. So around between 1:55, between 4:30, that's where Joan was missing around that time. Apparently, after 2:15, there was actually, I think it was 1:15, but sorry about that.
Oh, sorry.
Typo, but that was my bad. But there were a few potential sightings that where Joan was seen after she went missing. So we can go to the 2:45. A witness saw someone that matched Joan's description near State Highway. According to the witness, the woman looked to be wandering aimlessly on the side of the road. It was around 53 degrees Fahrenheit. She was hunched over as if she was cold, but she had a coat on. The witness also saw that there was a two-toned gray and blue sedan parked along the road.
Now, would that have been Joan's car?
Yeah, Bobby is really out to get this poor dry cleaner.
Colburn knew her husband was away, yeah?
I mean, that is fair to point out. So this gets more interesting. There was another sighting of Joan. So this same car, a neighbor's daughter actually saw this same car parked behind Joan's car in the Risch's driveway while she was walking home from school. Another neighbor saw that same car in the driveway 5 days earlier. But when Barbara had dropped Lillian off, she saw no other car than Joan's. And the thing is, I feel like Colburn is automatically out because if he had that same car, I think it would have been more questioned extensively. But who knows? He's a dry cleaner, and apparently dry cleaners are evil.
So someone saw a car at Joan's driveway after around 3-ish.
Yeah.
By 4:30, there was no other car there.
Yeah, I think I read it was the neighbor's daughter was walking from school, but maybe she was walking from somewhere else. I think people were under the assumption maybe. I would have to go again to double check on that, but yeah. The two neighbors saw this car on 2 different days. So around 3:15, 4:30. Now this was this was the most interesting sighting. I don't know if you want to read this one off, Rudy.
All right, yeah, let's see here. From 3:15 to approximately 4:30, there were various witnesses that saw a woman that looked like Joan walking along the road near a construction site. She looked dazed and she was hunched over, looking down and cradling something against her stomach. There was apparently blood running down the back and front of her legs. Despite the sight, no one pulled over to help her. Sightings stopped after this.
Yeah. So I've been talking with someone that's been researching this case himself. His name is Sean Driscoll, and he's from that area, and he explained some interesting things to me. So a big question I asked him is like, why do you think no one pulled over to help her out? And he was pointing out to me, well, through that highway, that's usually where the non-locals go through to pass through. It was probably some non-locals that didn't feel comfortable what they were seeing and moving on past.
Oh, a bunch of non-locals passed through that highway?
Yeah, apparently a lot of like non-locals like outside of Lincoln go through that highway a lot. So
Gotcha. See, now they keep saying that there's something cradled in her arms.
Mhm.
Was there any sign of her being pregnant?
There was, yeah, according to Martin, there was no indication that she would have been pregnant. Although, to be fair though, I think she would have to be very early in a pregnancy to not show anything yet. I mean, and to be honest with you,
Yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, because Barbara also said that she saw her cradling something red. And this sighting also says that she had blood on her legs. Despite the sight, no one pulled her. So I mean, maybe she was pregnant. She wasn't showing.
I mean, and to be fair, there are some women that when they're pregnant, they don't show for quite a while. So Bobby's raising two questions. Why didn't Barbara see the car? The car had to have been. Sorry, Bobby just put another comment. He is very invested in this case. So I think this car obviously left at some point that Barbara couldn't see them. Right?
Yeah, they left before Barbara was there.
Mm-hmm. And Bobby's also pointing out, why would non-locals come back and make those statements? I'm thinking they probably saw something in the paper about Joan and reached out to the police like, hey, I did see a woman around that time. Just so you know, maybe it was her.
Yeah. And she was having a baby with Colbert. Maybe.
The Sherlock Holmes of our generation. Thank you, Bobby. So then we go to the scene. And this is where things get interesting. Now we gotta know what went on in that house exactly. There were a lot of interesting pieces. We can go to let's start with the kitchen. So the table was turned over. The phone that was mounted on the wall, remember 1960s, landlines were in. The phone got torn off from the wall and was thrown into a wastebasket. The wastebasket was usually under the sink, but it was suddenly in the middle of the room. And on the counter, there was an address book, and that was open on emergency contacts, but it was blank. It had no numbers. Because I think people need to remember this was in the early 1960s. 911 was not really a thing until 1968. And it makes you wonder too, like if we had that technology then, would this have been a mystery?
So that's the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
The kitchen.
Yeah. And there's another photo too that shows a children's book. And so I'm like what me and Sean theorized was that, her daughter probably went in, probably had her book to read and wait for her mom. Mom didn't show up, a few minutes, which, for kids feel like ancient years. And then she's like, okay, I'll go call someone for help now. Which, remember, this is like a 4-year-old little girl.
So that's where the phone was yanked off.
Yeah.
And then the kitchen table.
Mm-hmm. I think
All
that's
around.
I think that's where the children's book is. I think that one in the
Okay.
left corner. It was a golden book. The one of those golden books I remember. So it gets weirder. I keep saying it gets weirder, but it gets weirder. So other than the phone, the trash also had empty bottles of beer. What's interesting about this is that there was no beer in the house. Joan and Martin did have liquor here and there, but they weren't beer drinkers. And Joan hadn't bought any beer that day when she and Lillian were out. So this makes me think that whatever happened, there was a second person that was involved.
So that's the wastebasket with the beers in it.
Yeah. Oh, and that is the children's book. Okay. I was trying to remember. I saw a children's book in there somewhere. And my friend Sean has a criminologist friend, and she was looking through the photos. I couldn't get all the photos here, but apparently, apparently the criminologist friend of his saw a footprint somewhere in there. But
wow.
yeah, I gotta talk with her more about that. Like, which photo is it? But Bobby has another theory.
Colburn liked beer. He got drunk, went back. There was a struggle. She told him she was pregnant.
Like a telenovela.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bobby. So let's talk about the blood.
Bobby really thinks it's the
dry cleaner guy. So police found that the red paint, as we all know, was actually blood. It was later identified as Joan's blood. It looked like there were paper towels and David's overalls were used to mop up the blood. A part of me wonders if that was the daughter that saw that. She was like, oh, it's a mess. Let me clean it up. But never saw any confirmation of that. So
I don't think little kids would really think about cleaning up red paint.
True.
I feel like paint. Well, I mean, for me, I think paint is so hard to clean up. It would be like a waste of time to try it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So there you have it. You can see that roll of paper towels over there. And
a lot of blood.
Yeah, apparently it was half a pint of blood.
Wow.
Which is quite a bit. It's not enough for a person to die of losing blood, but it's still quite a bit. So the blood was smeared on the walls, the floor, as you see. It also trailed up to like tiny drops on the second floor. And it looked like someone went up to the master bedroom where David's crib was. I'm thinking it was Joan to check up on him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another trail of blood led out of the kitchen into the driveway, and it ended at Joan's car, which was stained in 3 places. The right rear fender, the left side of the hood near the windshield, and the center of the trunk.
Interesting.
Yeah, the police weren't sure of where the blood first started. I feel like it was the kitchen because that feels like the main point of this whole thing. But it gets weirder. I feel like that should be our catchphrase.
Yeah.
So a bloody palm print was found, as well as various fingerprints. They were compared to Joan's medical records. It was not a match. It was someone else. There were no footprints that they could find. So the person either had to be very lucky or very careful to avoid that. But my friend, his criminologist friend, apparently she saw a footprint somewhere. But yeah, I'll have to do my own little sleuthing to figure that one out. So the police really leaned into the idea that maybe the blood trail ended outside and that she had been forced into a car. We're going to go into the theories of what people think happened later on. So
I'm wondering how the trail got upstairs, though. Was she trying to, like, escape going upstairs?
I mean, like I feel like her only reason to go upstairs was, I mean, maybe she did escape, but I feel like, it was her own house. She would know where to go, and I don't know how she could like escape through a second story window that way, right?
Yeah.
And yes, it always gets weirder. And a part of me kind of imagines her going upstairs to check on David, but if this was an intruder, how would she have the time to come up and check on the baby and before being forced, And I would, and if I was a parent, I'm not sure I would want to lead the intruder up to where the baby would be.
The other child, yeah.
Oh, before we move forward, Bobby has another theory.
Mm-hmm. She got a call from her husband. He was leaving her. She called someone, she yanked the phone, and she tried to kill herself. The person she called picked her up.
I mean, this is interesting because it makes me think of one of the theories.
So he flew all the way to New York and then just called her over there. He couldn't tell her in person.
No, you see, he had to go out of state in order to tell her, like, hey, babe, it's over. Yeah.
I'm staying in New York.
Hey, Bobby. So a year after Joan's disappearance, a local reporter for Lincoln, Massachusetts, Serene Gerson, I believe her name was, she was looking at some books, and she found in a checkout card for a book that had Joan's signature. It was dated September 16th, 1960. So this was like a month before Joan's disappearance. And before anyone asks, no, you cannot. Nowadays, you cannot find out who checked out the book before you. That goes against the code of library ethics, and we take our people's privacy very seriously. That is also why we seldom use the checkout cards.
That's creepy.
I mean, can you imagine back then? I mean, you would think that living in that period, you would have more privacy, but there were still other ways people can check up on you. But yeah, so Joan and a group of volunteers from the town's library committee looked around and put a list of 25 books that Joan checked out during that time. One of them was called Into Thin Air by Harry Carmichael. It was also known as Put Out That Star. And what's interesting was this book was about a woman faking her disappearance. You see, all these books had to do with crime. They had to do with disappearances, missing person.
She was into crime novels.
I mean, that's one argument too. Like, maybe it's nothing. Maybe she just liked crime novels. Like, I think people forget that a high amount of audience members for those kind of books are women. And, she's a stay-at-home mom. She's into, like, mysteries just to pass the time. And, yeah. So take that as you will. According to Joan Risch, Joan was just a big-time reader. And to be honest with you, a part of me wonders too, because prose writing was one of her hobbies. Maybe she wanted to write a story too, and those were her research. That's one theory I have.
The ultimate research is living out your story.
Yeah.
Maybe she needed to do this whole thing in order to write something.
Yeah. So I know that. So the number one person people always go to in these missing persons cases is the spouse. So we have Joan Risch, and I'm sorry I could not find a better photo of Martin, but he was cleared of any involvement whatsoever. He had a solid alibi, and he said that he and Joan had a happy marriage, which was also confirmed by family. And then we have Bobby's favorite person, WF, aka Walton Colburn. He was cleared of any involvement whatsoever. And I mean, he just had a few minutes. He only had like 15 minutes of interaction with her. And I got some people already had their ideas. Cynthia's saying that she got tired of being a stay-at-home mom. I mean, this was the 1960s. We've all watched Mad Men. Things were not as sunny as sometimes we like to think they are. You know?
I think that's probably one of the biggest
Mm-hmm.
biggest theories, that she just got tired of being a stay-at-home mom. I mean, she wasn't a very cautious mom either. She would just drop her kid off. She would, just drop her off at her neighbor's house and just come back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember too. Like, I remember my mom telling me, like, back in the 80s. This was the 80s and beforehand. She was like, if I stopped at a gas station, I would tell your sister to go here's some money, go buy me some pack of cigarettes in the 7-Eleven. And my sister, who was a kid at that time, would come out with them. And she was saying, yeah, it was no big deal. But now it's like you have to be you have to be 18 or up to buy cigarettes. I don't care if your mom's aside. She has to come in. And I think we were a lot more loose with the rules, so to speak, back then. Yeah. Lori has something very interesting too. This is one of the bigger theories too.
Yeah, that's a popular theory. So someone gave her a bad coat hanger abortion. Mm-hmm. It went bad. She was bleeding, got in car to go get help for herself, or to go dispose of some of the mess or evidence. Where was the car from?
So here's the thing, though. Joan's car, her own car, was left in the driveway, but there was some two-tone sedan, but they could never really connect to who it was, or if that car had anything to do with it, or if it was just a really, really weird coincidence. But we can go to the other suspects. There were two other suspects. The first one was Robert Foster.
All right, Robert Foster.
So neighbors did not like this man. So you see, back in 1959, Congress included Joan Risch's neighborhood as part of an area that was recognized as a historically important area due to the past with the American Revolutionary War. So the plan was to buy all the houses and restore the area to what it was at the beginning of the revolution. So Robert Foster was a purchasing agent from the National Park Service. He was visiting all the houses in Joan's neighborhood to discuss the project. According to some of the women, he, quote, overstayed his welcome and made them uncomfortable. Now, my friend Sean is looking to see if he could find any notes about this time through the national park and see what he can find. But in the meantime, the records were shown that the last time he talked to Joan was September, which was a month before her disappearance. And he had a solid alibi the day she disappeared. There were like 3 other people that were like, nope, he was here with us. He was at work. Yeah. So, yeah, I totally agree, Grace.
I mean, they could be, they could be covering for him.
I mean, we'll see what happens once Sean accesses those records, and if he can, we'll see how that goes. Another person was Harold Munder, and I feel like I could have found a lot. I feel like there should have been a lot more than there actually was, because this is very interesting to me. But my research went in circles when it came to this guy. So the mysterious two-tone sedan. They found a connection through a man named Harold Munder. He was an outpatient from a hospital in Bedford, if that sounds familiar to anyone. He had a car, he had a car described like the witnesses saw. Witnesses also saw him the same route Joan was thought to be spotted. According to witnesses, they saw him leave his car and walk into the woods to cut out some tree branches and drove away with them. I mean, I think it was just honestly, like, on the one hand, that is really weird, but on the other hand, I mean, weird stuff can happen at the same time as other stuff, Yeah,
true. It could be just a coincidence.
But yeah, so a local cab company contacted the police because apparently Harold came to send a telegram to his brother, and he was requesting money and was, quote, acting very strange. His description was similar to the man cutting the branches on Route 2A. But Yeah, I couldn't find anything, but the police didn't think it was a suspect after that for some reason. It was very strange not to find anything. I feel like if this was today, there would be a huge focus on this guy.
This guy would be, yeah, he'd be suspect number one.
Hmm.
He was hard to look. So it was difficult to say why Munder was hard to look up, but he was given the clear despite having the same car. So he was given the clear even though he had the same car
Yeah,
style. Saw.
yeah. I think you need to remember too, though, like the two-tone sedan. It wasn't confirmed if it was the same one that was at Joan's house, and this car just happened to be parked nearby. So maybe it was that Harold just parked the car near where Joan was supposedly last seen and did that. Another thing I wanted to add too, back to the sightings. So Sean, like I said, is a local and he's described a lot of things to me. He's saying that the first sighting of Joan on the road was only like 100 yards away from her house. But he was saying that the third one, the last one where the blood was seen on her,
Mhm.
that was too far away in that amount of time for her to walk from her house to over there. Unless, of course, you consider that maybe a car had thrown her out of the side of the road from there.
True.
So that's something to think about.
So now the good part. Now the good part.
Yes. The theories. So one theory is that an intruder went to the house when Joan stepped out. They were upstairs when Joan came back home, and the intruder was waiting until she came out again. Joan was outside when she saw someone inside the house with her baby, so she sent Lillian and Douglas to Barbara, and she went to check what was going on inside. At the same time, apparently, so in this theory, supposedly they ran into each other in the kitchen, and a struggle happens. And somehow, for some reason, the intruder takes Joan. So
Wow.
Joan did keep the front door unlocked. Good.
Yeah, that's a very plausible thing that could have happened. But the intruder would have stayed in the house like all day, basically.
And why would you go to a house in daylight?
And wouldn't have Joan called the. I mean, I think anyone would have called the police if she figured someone was in her house.
Yeah, it was very, yeah. It at first it makes sense, but then when you dig deeper, you're like, really? And like, and then why would the intruder then take Joan? Either he killed her and took her with him, or her, or or she was still alive and they took her. That why would you take someone that can say that you were there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean that makes sense. I mean, an intruder obviously is a plausible theory, but
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing about waiting for her to step out and do her errands and waiting upstairs and then they met in the kitchen. I think that's too much.
And honestly, like in daylight in the suburbs where neighbors could peer in, has no one watched Desperate Housewives?
Yeah, exactly. Barbara was just watching her the entire day.
So semi related to that was the police thinking that June was kidnapped. But like I said, if she was kidnapped, wouldn't there be a ransom? I mean, why else would you want to kidnap this woman that kept to herself, minded her business?
True.
The next one.
Unless there was someone that she knew.
That is true. I'm going to be honest with you. Through all these theories, I tend to favor the ones that involve another person with Joan, because the beer. I mean, there had to be someone with her, someone she chatted with, and probably had a long conversation based on those beers.
Yeah.
I actually wonder how many beers were in there. But yeah, another popular theory is that she was a stay-at-home mom and she hated, she didn't like it and she wanted to leave.
That's I think that one's probably up there with That's what I think actually happened.
Yeah, I think the whole case with the the books. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, unless it was someone she trusted. I mean, you don't really always share beer with a stranger, right?
exactly.
But yeah, Martin did say that. That their marriage was okay, but that was his point of view. And I don't want to like speculate too much, but Sean and I have talked, and we both thought it was very interesting, like how he seemed kind of like at first he was very, active in investigating what went on, but as time went on, he was very passive. Like he still kept the same, even when he moved, he still kept the same phone number. I guess as a way to hope that Joan would call him.
Yeah,
He did say that he thought that she was alive, but that she had amnesia of some sort.
that's kind of far fetched.
Yeah, I could
I
go.
added I added Martin's obituary there just because it was so sad.
Mhm.
It's just the line where it says, "Martin lived a difficult and good life. He endeavored to make life better for himself and his family, and
Mhm.
will be with us always." I think. Okay, well, I'll save what I think happened.
Mhm. Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're kind of running out of time, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, I think yeah, but there's still so much to come out from this. The at-home abortion thing is also a favorite theory. The or that she had a miscarriage and that she did not know about, and she was dazed and tired.
True. So,
And
well, you
another
can
popular.
hit on Joan met someone else and ran away with them. Joan staged her kidnapping.
Hmm.
I don't know, the whole staging thing with all the blood, that probably took a lot. That would take a lot of,
Time.
yeah, an effort. The
Yeah.
whole blood. And I just added the Barbara one just because it was interesting and funny.
Yeah, there was this idea that Barbara and her husband wanted to get rid of Joan, and that she was buried in this property they had out of town. But honestly, that one was a bit too thin, especially because Barbara Barker's husband, was not in any of the sources I saw. The Barkers still live there, by the way.
Oh, wow.
The grandchildren or the children, although according to Sean, they don't really like to talk about the case because, I mean, they just want to move on with their life, which
True. So what do you think? What do you think happened? What is your theory?
I think I think maybe Joan was in on it. A part of me wonders about that. But at the same time, though, she's a parent. I mean, would she really like just? And she seemed to care about. She seemed pretty devoted to them otherwise. So
No?
yeah, we're gonna. There's. I wish we could like talk a couple more hours on this because,
I
like
think
I said,
she staged her
mm,
kidnapping.
yeah, the Risch house, after Martin moved, the Risch house was taken down. And became part of the historical landmark. I think we're going to wrap up right now, but before we go, I want to thank you, Rudy, for joining in, and
Anytime.
I want to give a shout out to Sean for Sean is very active in researching this. He goes to the areas of that case quite a bit. So if you guys have any thoughts or theories, this is his email. Be sure to contact him if you have new information. Actually, if you do have new information, be sure to contact the Lincoln State Police.
True.
All right. Thank you guys so much, and y'all have a great time. Thanks, Rudy.
Yeah, no problem. Bye bye.
Bye.